Welcome back to That's Runnable. Or, if it's your first time with us, I'm Tommy, your guide, your host, the voice in your ears. Thanks for being here. Today, we're exploring grit, what it means, how to build it, and its crucial role in training and on race day. If you're out running right now, or you're in the gym, or you're not doing any of that, and you're like me, just chilling, I appreciate you tuning in, and get settled. I hope this will be a good one. Before we do get started though, I guess a bit of housekeeping. You might be just listening to this, but there are different ways that you can actually watch it. I've gone and bought myself a camera that should be better quality. So it's all a learning experience. And so you should be able to see me if you're using Spotify and it's a recent episode. This is episode 17. So from, I think it was 14 or 15, we had some video. And you can watch if you really want, but it is just me. So if you think facial expressions are important, then maybe give it a watch on YouTube or Spotify. I am uploading versions to YouTube. The process of uploading all of the previous episodes that didn't have video to YouTube is fairly long per episode because I'm having to add the visuals and re-export it with visuals and then upload it, and it all takes time. But by the end of the next few weeks, all of the episodes I would have caught up, and all of the episodes will have some sort of version on YouTube. The episodes 1 to 14 will only be just some normal visuals, but if you are a YouTube premium user, you can, obviously use YouTube and run with it or whatever you're doing, so you can listen to all of the episodes. In a couple of weeks we'll have it all sorted. But if you are listening to a newer episode, you can watch it if you want, is what I'm saying. But thanks for your patience, everyone who's been listening on YouTube Premium, or wanting to at least. It's all coming. I'm doing it for you. And thanks for the encouragement to get it done. I was a bit scared of doing video, to be honest, but here we are. Yeah, got to do it. And I guess that's all the housekeeping, outside of just wanting to say it's 2025, and that sounds crazy. So I just wanted to say thank you for supporting me last year. Last episode was the last episode of 2024. This is the first. I won't reflect too much on 2024, but it really does mean the world to me that you're listening. And every time I sort of sit down to record one of these, I procrastinate for a bit, and then I finally pluck up the courage to hit record and get going on a topic in some depth. And I just want to promise you that the show will get better. And that's because, that's what happens when you do something for a while. And I plan to do this for a while. So if you're here for the journey, if you're here for the start, the messier, less perfect episodes, then thanks for being here, and I really do appreciate it. As we start the year, I just wanted to offer you my gratitude for tuning in. And by doing that, I wanted to also sort of take a moment, and if you don't want to listen to this bit, you can skip ahead. But I just wanted to take a moment to sort of remind you, if you don't know already, or if you're listening, you've heard it already, what That's Runnable is sort of all about. Very quickly, it's really just an extension of my own ethos. At the end of the day, I have the knowledge I have, the perspective I have, and it has in some way resonated with a lot of people on social media. And I've been frustrated with social media because there's only so much you can say in a 90-second video or a 1-minute video. And I've really craved the ability to kind of try and go deeper on topics. And so That's Runnable as a podcast gives me the ability to do that, but I really want to build out That's Runnable as a brand, and that brand is an extension of my own ethos, and it's one that sort of joined the running community fairly early on in my adult life, but fairly early on for the majority of runners. I was about 18. I was no sort of school runner or cross-country runner as a kid or anything like that. But I came from a rugby background. I started running when I became an adult, essentially. And I didn't really, much of the running community didn't really appeal to me all that much. And I don't really know why. It's hard to put my finger on why that was. But maybe I was just an indie kid and I carried on wanting to be an indie kid and I didn't like the sort of normal running crowd. But for whatever stupid reason, I sort of didn't feel like I fit into running. It took me a while to kind of self-identify as a runner. And really it happened when I was introduced to trail running in a sort of more formal way. I'd always learnt to run on trails and in the outdoors on the hills of, the English Southern Hills. I didn't know that I was a trail runner until I found trail running and ultra running and the whole community behind that. And so really a lot of the sort of ethos about my running, I guess, is influenced by a little bit more of a enjoyment of the outdoors, doing it for all of the additional benefits we can get from it, rather than necessarily just the performance side of it, although I do care a lot about that. And I think the whole endeavor is something that I think trail and ultra running really communicated to me in a deeper way than road running did. But through all of it, and through making content and sort of just being a lot more engaged in the space, I've just come to love all running and everything it's about. And I want to represent my own ethos in the hope that I find people who maybe were once like me, once sort of disillusioned by the running space, or just didn't like the elitism in it and didn't like the sort of the certain aspects of it, and sort of thought or think currently that, a lot of it is not for them. And I want to be there for the kind of every runner, the people like I used to be, and sort of convince you that through That's Runnable that there's a space for you. And so I want That's Runnable to really be an extension of that ethos and be more than me. I of course want to grow the podcast. I want to grow the brand. I want to do this full time. And so your support means a lot to me. If you're here for the journey, if that resonates, or if it sounds like your kind of thing, then I really appreciate all of the support that comes my way for it. If you want to share the podcast, if you like the podcast, you want to share it, rate it, do all of the sort of things that you do to support in that obvious way. It does mean a huge amount. And really in these times, that is the most impactful thing you can do in these times of algorithmic slavery. The best way to support is to get it out there and reach as many people as we can. Before we do get started, I want to just give a quick word to Innovate. Innovate are the sponsor of this episode, making it all happen. I wanted to quickly highlight the breadth of options they have on their website. They're not just a shoe company. They're not just experts in trail and fell shoes. They make all sorts of shoes, but they've also got running clothes, jackets, long sleeve tops, gloves, mittens, socks, waterproof shorts, gym shoes, weightlifting shoes, barefoot shoes, all sorts of hoodies, t-shirts, leggings. There's so much on Innovate's website that I really think you should go check out. So although I've been talking a lot about their shoes specifically, their gear is great too, and I think you should go check them out. Runnable for 15% off at checkout. Innovate are such a great brand, and I want to see them succeed. If you want to support the show, support them, go and check them out at inov8.com, and it's Runnable at checkout for 15% off. Today's topic is grit. We're going to be talking about what grit is, building grit, grit on race day, and balancing grit and self-compassion. So there's 4 segments here for you, and I had a few working titles for this episode. They were all pretty lame, I think, and so what I've gone with is what I've gone with, but I'd actually know at this point. I will decide after doing it. But I had how to build grit for your running, grit, the unseen force of ultra running, the backbone of every runner. I had unlocking your inner strength in running, building grit, a runner's guide to unwavering determination. I kind of like that one in a cheesy way, but I may have gone with that one. Apologies if you think it's cheesy. But really what we're trying to talk about today is what grit is, the fact that you can build it. It is something that you can, it's not just an inherent thing that you can use. It's something you can build. Grit on race day. Why it's important specifically on race day. And to conclude, balancing grit and self-compassion. A really important aspect of understanding grit is balancing it with self-care. So segment 1, what is grit? Let's start by defining grit. Well, I actually have a book here from the Harvard Business Review Press, which is a little book. It's part of an emotional intelligence series. And it's quite good. I mean, it's got some sort of interviews with people who have shown grit in different industries and disciplines. And it's quite a good little read. And it's sort of, this episode was influenced by that, but I read it quite a while ago. I sort of picked it back up again and started skimming through it. And it did help for this episode. And in this book, it describes grit as perseverance and passion for achieving long-term goals. Perseverance and passion for achieving long-term goals. What does that really mean for us then as runners? Well, I want to break it down. I want to try to anyway. I want to break down the sort of core characteristics of grit and why it's such an essential and necessary part of your running. So grit has the unwavering perseverance and passion for long-term goals that it is. It's by having that sort of inner strength that keeps you moving forward when things get tough. You're showing grit. That's what grit is, where you show resilience and determination, and it's sort of a culmination of good characteristics. Resilience, determination, the ability to push through adversity, they're all the hallmarks of grit. And that's how today we're defining it, at least. If you disagree, then let's call it a different thing. But that's my understanding of grit. And it's about, staying the course, no matter what comes your way, no matter what challenges come your way, obstacles come your way, you stay the course and you're determined to get to the long-term goal that you're chasing. So that is what grit is. The unwavering perseverance and passion for long-term goals. Segment 2 then. Little fly in my way. Now that we sort of understand, I guess, what grit is, I hope that made sense. How do we build it? Building grit. Building grit. How do we build grit? Can we build grit, or is it just something that just we're born with? Some may be able to show more grit. Some, you might say, have more than others. But it is certainly something that you can develop, that you can grow and build and get better at. And I think if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be talking about it as an important thing that you should work on. It is something that you can build, and it's something I'm always trying to build. I think we all should, in all walks of life. And when it comes to our running is both a way of showing ourselves and others our capabilities when it comes to grit, how much we can persevere, how determined we are. I think many would argue that someone who is a long distance runner who does these things, these extracurricular activities, they're someone who shows a lot of determination, is driven. And I think that's, it's one way of showing it, but it's also, and most importantly, a way of developing it and building it. Being a runner helps to develop grit. It helps to make you more resilient and able to deal with tough physical and mental situations. But developing grit isn't a very quick overnight process. This is something you have to work on day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out. I would say that it's something that's you know, life teaches you. It's something that's a lifelong endeavor, is doing things that require more of you, that train you to be more able to take on hard things. That's what we're doing here. It's not an overnight process. It's a long developing process. And it's about setting goals, embracing challenges, and maintaining consistency. So I want to dive into some of those and offer some, I guess, practical steps that you can take to strengthen your grit and enhance your running experience. I've got 3 here: setting goals, embracing challenges, and consistency is key. So setting goals. You can't have grit without some sort of purpose. You can't be determined without something you're determined to do or get to. You have to have purpose. So you have to have these goals. By definition, if we refer back to the definition, grit is unwavering perseverance and passion for long-term goals. So we have to have the goals. You can't have grit without purpose. So start with clear, meaningful goals, things that mean a lot to you. Think about what those goals are. Often in running, we talk about our why. What is your why? Which in preferred, in better English would be what is your reason? But we in running call it your why for some reason. And you got to think deeply about what that is. Start with clear, meaningful reasons why you run and set goals based on that. And then those goals, break them into smaller, achievable milestones. And you're doing that so that every day, day in, day out, you can maintain motivated and track your progress. The goals that you set, the big goals, the long-term goals, they should be challenging. They should be so ambitious. They should be intimidating. Think about ambitious, confident, everything going well sorts of goals long into the future. And they need to mean something to you. But you need to bring both long-term goals and an understanding of what it means to get there, reverse engineer it with smaller milestones to get there. You need to bring them together. Like, for example, the goal of the finish line could be broken up into all of the thousands of steps it takes to get there. Therefore, every step matters. Every step is worth celebrating because it gets you towards the ultimate goal, the long-term goal. And you show grit through each step, each literal step you take. So reverse engineer your big goals. Set lofty goals. You can't have grit without purpose. Set lofty goals, reverse engineer it, break it down into different little milestones, and celebrate as you go through and achieve those milestones with grit. So that's setting goals on how to build grit. We're talking about building grit here. Set goals. Second, embrace challenges. Embrace challenges. Face challenges head on. Each obstacle is an opportunity to grow stronger and more resilient. We all know this. We all know that everything that gets in our way could potentially make us stronger. You know, we've got many rhymes. You know, what doesn't hurt you makes you stronger. There's plenty of song lyrics about it. We all know it. And but I think we often forget it. You know, we approach sort of obstacles, we approach injuries, we approach all sorts that gets in our way, and we don't respond in the right way to it. We don't show grit. We get emotional. I do it all the time, you know. Something will get in my way and you don't respond with a positive outlook on that obstacle. Sometimes you have so many obstacles, it's hard to maintain your resilience and to keep showing grit. But it's important to view your challenges in a different light. I don't know if any of you know Jocko Willink. Uh, what a guy. He has like there's a very famous video on YouTube that came out probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe. I don't know. And it's from Jocko Willink on his podcast. And if you type in Jocko Willink, good, go and watch that and come back. I think it's like, it will be like the second result if you type in his name. It's a very famous speech from him, from his podcast. And he talks about the idea that when things are going bad, there's gonna be some good that comes from it. When things go bad, there's gonna be some good that's gonna come from it. And he starts listing all these things that could go wrong and then responds, good, to every single thing. So in the context of running, he's like, didn't get the PR you wanted, good. You can learn what didn't go to plan and work on it on next time. DNF'd an ultra, good. There's many deep lessons you can learn from not finishing a race you worked hard for. Got injured, good. Unexpected challenges, good. You have the opportunity to figure out a solution. And he goes on like that, you know. And, you know, I think to some extent, for a lot of things, especially within the context of running, if you can answer good to these challenges, I know it's extreme, but if you can try and see the positives in things throughout your running journey, if things aren't going to plan, if you're faced with the challenge, as you will in life, don't flap, don't panic, try not to complain. Each time things are hard, it's an opportunity to test your resilience, to test your ability to keep moving forward and to build grit. This is why I love running, because when looking at the theory of, like, running is something that's allowed me to look deeply at the theory of grit, to discuss it, because in the context of running it makes so much sense. But man, doesn't it make a lot of sense for our lives? Running is literally the metaphor for life, I swear. Okay, thirdly, consistency is key. Regular practice and commitment to your training routine builds grit over time. You know, consistency is such a key part of building grit. It's about showing up even when you don't feel like it. Probably the single most important part of your training is consistency. Those who are consistent, those who are showing up, who don't quit, those are the people who do well in any endeavor. And it's no different in running. Over the course of the next year of training, there will be plenty of times that you don't want to do it. In fact, there will be times where it's the last thing you want to do. But doing it anyway, not succumbing to your mood, but just consistently showing up, putting in the work, builds grit, and it makes you stronger. So that's about building grit. That's setting goals, embracing challenges, and consistency is key. Okay, segment 3, we've got a little section talking about grit in racing. I think they have a huge role in your performance during a race. And as an ultra runner, I don't think there's anything else that compares in my experience of anything that I've ever done. Ultra endurance racing requires grit more than anything I've tried. And in ultra races, grit is just what is the thing that's going to get you through those grueling kilometers and miles, and the grueling hills, the mountains you're climbing. It's those chapters during an ultra where you just don't want to carry on. Grit is what's going to get you through that. And it's the mental toughness. It's the mental toughness that really helps you endure what your body doesn't want to. When your mind is saying, I want to quit, when your body is in pain, seemingly too much, grit gets you through to complete something truly amazing. I've never found anything that comes close to ultra running as it relates to requirement for grit. There have been times where I've just wanted to quit during a race, rattling off excuses to myself as I run along, excuses for stopping, so I could tell people why I stopped. Oh, could I fake an injury? All this stuff. Believing I had nothing left in the tank. But somehow, touch wood, so far, I've always found a way to find something in me that sometimes I truly didn't know was there. And I think everyone else can do that too. Without grit, without determination to push through and reach the goal, you just won't make it. And the role in ultra is very clear. But grit is needed also in any race, whether it's a 5K or a marathon. Grit is essential. It's about pushing past your limits, striving for personal bests. It's about really digging deep. You won't believe how uncomfortable, if you haven't done it before, a 5K best effort is. Horrible. Absolutely disgusting distance to be running the fastest possible time you can for fun. But, many would say that about ultra distances. I hate 5Ks. To get through kilometer 3, 4 to the end on a 5K best effort is horrible. Requires serious amounts of grit and determination for a very short period of time, but you get through it. That's for any race. So both in the context of ultra running, for any race of any distance, from 5K, 10K, half marathon, 80K, 100K, 100 miles, all of it all requires grit. And I wanted to just tell a story that kind of inspired me and many other ultra runners, and not necessarily for reasons that you might expect. We are currently here in the UK in the middle of winter. Many of us nearby, geographically, are in the middle of the winter, and we are approaching spring. And you and I both know that it's pretty wet during that period of time. So you might be in the market for a new waterproof, a new breathable waterproof. I want to guide you towards Innovate. Innovate have some options that are Pertex rather than being the bad for the environment Gore-Tex. Pertex is a slightly better option, and there's plenty of options on innovate.com to check out their waterproofs, check out their Storm Shield, I believe it's called, that they've got, and a few others. I'm using their waterproof at the moment for when it's really wet, and given that they're from the Fells, they're from very infamously wet Cumbria, they know what they're doing on this front. So you get 15% off with the unique code Runnable, RUNNABLE, at innovate.com, INOV8.com. Check them out if you're in the market for a waterproof or anything else they have on offer. Okay, back to the show. So many of you will have heard of the Barkley Marathons. This race is infamous for its treacherous terrain, unpredictable weather, and the fact that only a handful of runners have actually completed it since it was, I don't know how long it's been going on for, but for many years, and very few people have actually completed it within the 60-hour time limit. Many of you will know this race. It's a 5-loop, 20 mile per loop, but usually it's more because people get lost and the terrain's so horrible, and usually it ends up being far more than 100 miles in total, but it has to be done in 60 hours, and it is a very grueling race, and very few people have completed it. And I think it was in 2017 where a man who everyone loves in the ultra space, or a lot of people love in the ultra space, Gary Robbins, in 2017 lined up for his third, I believe, or fourth attempt at the Barkley Marathons, and he had dealt with injury in the run-up to the race, injury that would probably take most top athletes out, but he managed to recover, managed to prepare for the race, and he did 4 laps, was doing well, seemed on time. And through the race, he got lost in the fog. The story is crazy because every runner in that race has a crazy independent story. This was documented, so we all got to watch. He got lost, all sorts happened, and then he was cutting it really fine on the final lap. And on the final and fifth lap, he got in 60 hours and 6 seconds. He was 6 seconds late of making it, thus disqualifying his place. He didn't complete the Barkley marathons within the allotted time. And so you may think that was, not as an amazing story to tell, but I think just missing it finally just communicates something that's so special about this sport and really highlights the essence of grit, persevering through setbacks, pushing the limits of what's possible. And although he didn't finish officially, his effort was extraordinary. And it's just a bit of a testament of the power of grit and resilience, and showing that sometimes the journey itself, the story of getting there, is far more significant than the outcome itself. 6 seconds, so killer. And I love that story. I think he showed just real grit, and it's one of so many different stories in the running world, in the running space at large, the ultra running space, the marathon race individually. There's amazing history and amazing displays of grit if you look back. And that was just one example I kind of wanted to share. So that was segment 3 on grit and racing. The role in ultra races, in every race, and then a bit of a story there about Gary Robbins. Segment 4, balancing grit with self-compassion. Balancing grit and self-compassion. There is often a bit of a confusion with grit, and I think a lot of people get confused with many things like this, that sort of one characteristic in many people's minds cannot be paired with an opposing characteristic. But I think that's a misunderstanding of behaviors that are required, positive behaviors that are required at the right time. And I think grit is required of us. And it is compassionate of ourselves. It shows self-care to often lean into developing grit, to lean into building grit as an important thing that we try and do. Grit doesn't mean, though, not listening to yourself, not listening to your body, not recognizing when you need to rest and recover. Grit is not about destroying yourself. It's about being honest about what's actually possible and doing it. It's sort of about what That's Runnable really tries to stand for. Run the runnable. Do what you actually can. If you know it's runnable, run it. Do what is in front of you. Take an outlook that is controlling the controllables, doing the doable. That's what this is about. That's what grit shows. Grit isn't about destroying yourself. It's about being honest about what's possible and actually doing it. About doing the thing despite not wanting to. Because you know that's good. It's good to build resilience. It's good to build grit. All of the training through winter that I'm doing for my races next year, all of that training is not just training me physically, it's training me mentally throughout this season. So it's an important thing to have for our running. It's an important thing for us to develop as individuals. And it's being gritty and being resilient and determined, especially, in the context of a race, it can often be misunderstood as you're just destroying yourself. What you're doing, if done in the right way, if balanced with self-compassion, self-care, and if understood to be not just pushing through and destroying yourself for the sake of it, you can find places where you are more capable than you realize you are. You are more capable of going for that morning run. You are more capable of showing up more consistently. Too often I see people not believing in themselves. They quit before they need to. They sack off a workout because they're not in the mood. I do it. I do it all the time. We all do. But there is value to be found in showing up for yourself when your mind says, you're done, quit, can't be bothered. In consistently showing up for yourself, you're building grit and you're being self-compassionate. You're caring for yourself because you're building that grit, and that is important. But it is always really important to make sure you view all of your achievements in a positive way. Practical kindness towards yourself is essential. Acknowledging your efforts and progress is essential. Even if things don't go to plan, if you don't complete what you always intended to complete. Being kind to yourself is important. Along the way, you will struggle. You will need to find grit. You will need to show grit. Be proud of yourself every time you do. Don't look for reasons why you're not enough. Give yourself reasons to pat yourself on the back. If you are showing up consistently, overcoming your ill-disciplined desires, building resilience, improving, getting better at it, you're doing well. Know that you're doing well. As I said at the start, this is a process. It's a development. It's long-term goals that we're talking about. And it's long-term thinking. And you will not do well at this if you beat yourself up all the time. That's not what grit is. That is the opposite of grit. Showing grit and resilience is showing pure determination. And that requires that you don't beat yourself up, that you don't get emotional about when things go bad. So, today we sort of explored the essence of grit, how to cultivate it, its role in racing, and the importance of balancing it with self-compassion and understanding that they are one and the same. The first segment was just defining what grit is, the perseverance and passion for achieving long-term goals, how to build grit, set goals, embrace challenges, focus on consistency. And remember, Jocko Willink's good. Have a watch of that on YouTube. It's quite fun. And then segment 3 was grit and racing. Its role in ultra races, but in every other distance and type of race. Anything you're putting your best effort into. And Gary Robbins with a inspirational story. And balancing grit and self-compassion to finish up, which I hope did close it off well-rounded. I guess to finish really and conclude, I wanted to sort of reflect on my own journey with grit. I guess ultra running for me has always been a reason to pursue things that would build grit and resilience, to see what I'm capable of. And it's really as simple as that. I do it because I can. I want to. Yeah, and that's like that's my why. If that makes sense. I do it because I can, and I want to develop grit in that way. And there's all sorts of other, more interesting reasons I think that I like to do it. I mean, or maybe less interesting things, which is just that I'm really into the outdoors, love the mountains and love the idea of climbing the mountains on my feet, and that's fun. But also it is to build grit and resilience, and it's really the mental exploration, the psychological exploration, you could say, that is interesting to me. So we've reached that part of the episode that we do listener questions, which is fun. It feels like it's been ages since I've answered some listener questions, but maybe not. I think I skipped it last episode, but the one before that maybe we had some. And I will also catch up with a Q&A. In a couple of episodes, we'll do another Q&A, and I'll just sort of catch up with some of the remaining questions. They have slowed down, so if you want to ask a question and you want to you want it featured and you want to discuss a topic or whatever on the next episode, on a future episode, you can go down to the description, go to the show notes, and it's just a little recording. You can obviously write in if you wanted to, but I do try and keep to the audio format. I think it's kind of more interesting that way, and it sort of encourages other people to get involved, and it's a break from my voice, which is important. So, first question, why don't we just dive in? This one's from, I haven't listened to them either. So this is from Mike.
Hi Tommy, Mike from Yorkshire here. Hope you're doing good. A quick question, which do you think has more of a negative impact? And this is in regards to overdressing or underdressing for the cold weather. So sometimes I find myself really wrapping up and putting too many layers on, it being uncomfortable, it being, I guess, I get too hot during the runs. And then also on the other hand, I underdress for the occasion and I seem to not be able to warm up during the run, getting more aches and pains in my muscles and bones, etc. I see that you sometimes go out a long sleeve t-shirt and shorts. Just wondered what your opinion in terms of warming up, keeping warm in this cool weather. And last but not least, a quick question for you. Are you a segment sniper on Strava?
No, I'm not a segment sniper on Strava. I like it when Strava calls me a legend, a local legend, but then I'm like, I need to change up my route, and that's about the extent to which I do segments. Although sometimes I like to compare different segments I've run, but I don't snipe segments. I'm not even capable of doing so yet. Don't you have to run the fastest? Isn't that what that means? So I wouldn't be able to do it. What was the question again? Yeah, no, it was about winter running. Thanks for the question, Mike. I mean, I guess I should just point you back to the last episode, which will have come out after you asked this question. So that's fair enough. So I hope you did listen to that. So it may all just have been in there. But do go back to that episode if you wanted to give that a listen, because we sort of have a bit of there's a section on it that talks about layering up and the importance of layering up and the sort of pros and cons of doing so. And I guess I would just say it is a difficult one to strike the balance of. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily true that, being too hot versus being too cold is better or worse. It's all personal preference. It's all what you think you're most comfortable in. And so I like the mantra, be bold, start cold. If you're not a little bit cold in the winter when you've just stepped out the door, you have definitely overdressed. And I would say you always want to start a bit chilly. And I mean, today I layered up. I had like a Innovate like vest gilet type zip up thing on with another sort of longer sleeve Innovate thermal, and then I had a Soar over the top, not sponsored, over the top, and then I had my sort of hat and woolly hat on, and I did have gloves on and some tights as well. That was all because it was like -1 and I was doing an easy run. So I wanted to stay warm. But towards the end of the run, I did have to sort of unzip for a bit just to cool myself off. But that was what I did today. I mean, you can get it wrong. We all get it wrong occasionally. But it comes with experience, I think, just like knowing what you should wear for what temperatures and stuff. But it's a difficult one to strike the balance, I would definitely say. Thanks for the question, Mike. rambled a bit for that one. Thank you.
Hi Tommy, Helena from Somerset here. Just wanted to say thank you very much for your Instagram and now the podcast. I'm finding it so helpful as someone relatively new to running, so thank you. Your advice is always much appreciated. This might be a bit of a depressing question, but I wondered, I live in quite a rural area and doesn't have very many pavements, street lighting, that kind of infrastructure, so it makes running a bit challenging, especially when mainly car drivers honk at you or shout abuse or stop and shout abuse, all that horrible stuff. And, you know, in the summer with men shouting a different kind of abuse. And I know that your whole like strategy is to get people out running. And that's your philosophy to try and get people out the door. And it becomes harder when that's the kind of thing you're facing. So wondered if you had any advice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great question. Thanks for the question. I think there's two things we can talk about here. Running in the dark, it's always going to be more dangerous. It really depends where you live, what your area is like. Obviously, if you're running in the dark, you do want to, as much as possible, avoid main roads, avoid roads without a path, and just generally roads that do pose risk for a driver not paying attention to, at the very least, come too close to you and then themselves feel angry, or suddenly see you then feel angry. There's gonna be angry drivers. I mean, that is just the fact of it. If you're running down the road, I mean, I've experienced it a lot running down the road in the night with angry drivers in the countryside, and you get beeped or you get, revved, or people shout stuff at you. It does happen, and it happens to everyone. And the only thing I can say is avoid roads like that, of course. If you can't avoid roads like that, visibility is absolutely is so important when you're running down those roads. So wearing lights, wearing reflective gear, all that sort of stuff, you are allowed to do it as long as you're visible. So make sure you're visible. So that's the overall, that's for everyone who's running on dodgy roads, in the dark, roads that drivers could make mistakes on, could not see you. Protect yourselves. I'm not going to sit here and rant about how horrible those drivers are, because we all just agree. Obviously horrible, but there are horrible people that will do that, and it's a shame. But just be as clear and visible as you can and avoid it where you can. But the other topic that I think is more frustrating and does require more conversation is, for women, it's a very different experience running either in the dark, especially, of course, for obvious reasons, but also in the day and in the summer. Women have a very different experience when training in their running, and I am not someone who can speak on behalf of it. All I can say is to encourage anyone listening to call it out when you see it, and make sure it's not encouraged. You know what it is. Catcalling, whistling, all that sort of stuff. Horrible behaviour, so call it out when you see it, and let's do our bit to try and stop that from being something that we, in any country, but for my friends here in the UK, let's stop it from being even a consideration for women. I don't think I'm the person to answer that question in terms of dealing with men and harassment and that side of things, but I will say to everyone, if you're running in dangerous dark places, be visible and avoid it where you can. Let's do one more question here from Stacey.
Hi, Tommy. I have probably an age-old question. How do you fuel for your runs, both the kind of short runs and then the kind of longer 10K plus runs? And sort of how soon before a run do you eat? An hour before, 2 hours before. What's your kind of what's your standard sort of routine? Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Stacey. it's going to be different for everyone. For me, I don't tend to fuel too much before, this is for me, before something like anything less than an hour of running, or an hour and 20 of running at the moment. I don't tend to fuel much just before the run. I'll go out almost on an empty stomach at the moment. I'll have coffee and a bit of overnight oats right now. I've done that last few days, and I will go out on that, and then I'll be starving when I get back, and I'll try and eat something decent when I get back. And then that keeps my stomach pretty settled, and I have enough energy for an easy sort of 1 hour 20. For any sort of specific workouts, or if I'm up in the pace and that sort of stuff, and if I'm going further than an hour and a half of running, I'll have a meal before. I'll tend to have a meal sort of 2 hours before. That would be intentional. But if I'm running on my sort of daily sort of pre-work kind of routine, then I will not have a huge amount. I think eating afterwards is really important. So I have a good balanced meal after where I can. And I tend to fuel up. I sort of eat more throughout the day. That's how I do it. That's my sort of standard routine, if that helps. Thanks for the question. All right, we've got one more question here. I'll do it because we've got lots to get through, and I'm just sort of enjoying it. But here's another one.
Hi, Tommy. I love your podcast. I've just found it. It's really fun. I'm just getting back into running after 6 years of not really running much due to having 3 kids. And I'm just coming across an issue I've had before, which is ITB pain, like agony. And just like your top tips on how to avoid that and other common injuries, I guess. I presume you're going to say strengthening, but I'd love to know any particular hot tips. Anyway, thanks, and good luck on your runs.
Thanks, Sarah. Great question. It's a great question because it's a common problem, sadly. IT band syndrome, it's often called. And there's all sorts you can do for this. Yes, I will say strengthen. But I think it's important to stress the importance of going to see, if you can, going to see a physio or using some sort of online physio service. For an IT band syndrome issue, consulting with someone, there's a lot of online services you can even use that are much cheaper. Consulting with a physio or going to see a physio is a really important thing to do, because what that will do, a lot of people, they hear strength train and then they don't know what they're doing. So going to a physio gives you a good kind of few movements and exercises to be doing, to be progressing, to get you up to baseline, to get rid of that injury, to get you back to the baseline, and then to go from there. And so see a physio. It's a good investment. So I would see a physio for your issue of IT band syndrome, as common as it might be. There's plenty of exercises online that you can find for it, but having a good program in place, even for sort of 6 weeks with your physio, is a very good thing to do. I was thinking about this the other day. You asked at the end there, any particular hot tips, because you're sort of like, I know you say strengthen, but any hot tips, any sort of special tips? Those are fun, and some might say use a roller, or some might say use a certain balm, or use some might even claim ice baths, or all these sorts of things that are claim, or magnesium, or everything that's claiming to help you with all of these ailments. They are nothing compared to the basics. They are nothing compared to getting the basics right of a good strength program, of easy running the majority of the time, and working on mobility in your strength work, and good nutrition and good sleep for recovery. These are basic stuff. And it's those things that are really important. So my advice for anyone out there, and yourself, Sarah, if you've got IT band syndrome, it's agony like you said, go see a physio. Get some professional advice, because they will look at everything. They'll do an assessment. They'll get you to do movements, and they'll understand how your body's moving, and they'll work with you. It's a good investment. So I don't want to sit here and just give you exercises you could find online for IT band syndrome, because I'm not a physio. But yeah, I hope that helps, because that is really the best advice. See a physio. Bit of a matter of fact answer on the end there. A big thank you to Innovate, our sponsors of the episode. Innovate.com, Runnable for 15% off. If you've enjoyed this episode, if you haven't yet rated the show and you'd like to, whatever platform you're watching this on or listening to this on, if it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all of the other options you have out there, do what the app allows you to do if you want to, and drop it a rating. Maybe share it with a mate if you thought it was kind of interesting. And I really appreciate and love your support. Thanks so much. That's it for today's episode. Until next time, run the runnable. Keep showing up for yourself, and I'll see you next time.